All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jonathan Conning. I'm here to introduce Ricardo Ffrench-Davis, who we could hardly ask for a better person to talk about the Chilean economy over time, because he's been there. In fact, I did an event like this before, maybe 2 years ago, and as I was thinking about what to say, I keep on preparing remarks for the talks that I wish he would give. I mean, Ricardo has been in so many places, in such interesting roles for so long. As just to mention a few briefly, he is in some ways a Chicago boy because he's trained as a PhD economist at the University of Chicago, but in many other ways he's one of the best known critics of the Chicago boys, the term, in Chile. He worked in the central bank, always associated with the University of Chile, Católica early on. Just as a little side note, in the famous three-way election between Allende, Tomic, and Alessandri, this man would have been Tomic's top economic advisor, so you can imagine how history might have run had it played out differently, a little bit differently, that election. But then also very importantly, there's so many things I could mention about his career, the 19 books, the 130 articles, but also just, very important contributions to Chilean politics and economic transformation. He was one of the founding members of CIEPLAN, which was sort of, as many of you know, during the years of the dictatorship, sort of the think tank that was allowed to operate and sort of often in the shadows, but over time helped build intellectual teams that over time became, the teams that ran the very successful Concertación government for 2 decades. So he's really been associated with ideas, with the training of minds, and then in government he's also contributed very often in high-level commissions, as Chilean representative or as a representative to the UN. So I could read through his CV, but I couldn't possibly do justice to all the things he's done. But the interesting about him is that he's really been, very close to debates, to discussions. He's sort of been close to movers and shakers and so many things. So today's here to talk to us about challenges for the Chilean economy under cyclical shocks 1999 to 2016. I'll let him get going, and we're going to have him talk, what did we say, how long did you say? An hour? And
at most 1 hour.
1 hour, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions and following up that. At most 1 hour, right? And I would say, do feel free to interrupt if you have an important clarifying question, and we'll run it as a seminar. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back here after a couple of years being absent. The idea is to end discussing the last 3 or 4 years in the Chilean economy, but as usual, I'd like to give an overview of the last 4 decades, principally because one continues to see in Wall Street Journal, sometimes Financial Times, in El Mercurio Chile or La Tercera in Chile, frequently the notice Chile has made a good economy in the last 3 or 4 decades, with the quotation, the Chilean model. And we can see that there have been very significant differences along these 40 years in policies and in outcome. And of course, we don't have a Chilean model. We have had different economic models working in different moments of these 40 years. The talk is about economics, economic development. Economic development, GDP. the availability each year of additional goods and services. We need capital and labor to produce it. Capital. To accumulate additional capital, stock of capital goods. And labor, the quantity and the quality of people. And something that is very useful, very relevant, very obvious, but is almost always forgotten in present teaching of economics. We need more capital, better labor, and we need to use it. And what we have been doing in macroeconomics across Latin America, and in the last 15 or 18 years in Chile, and in many places of the world, is applying policies that usually imply a large underutilization of the labor and the capital that you have, under using your potential GDP. And that has been quite frequent in the Chilean economy and has made a significant difference in outcomes. And that gap between potential and actual GDP is a sort of policies. It's not only luck, maybe sometimes luck, but depends on what happens abroad, but on what you do in your domestic economy. And that is the difference between macroeconomics for low inflation or a macro for low inflation with high employment and high economic growth and better inclusion in the economy. Where we are now, Chile has a per capita GDP in purchasing power parity around 40% of the US, of that of the US. Per capita GDP purchasing power parity. In the year of the coup, 1973, the start of Pinochet, Chile was 27% of the US. In the end of the dictatorship, 1989, was 24. Chile was farther below the US after the end of the dictatorship instead of very close. That is not a good economic model. And this is usually forgotten. And there are plain numbers. Go to the World Bank data and you have to process it, you will find this. What happened in the first 8 years of democracy? We jumped from 24 to 34. In 8 years, a jump of 10 points. 16 years with a growth of 3 points. Then 8 years with a jump of 10 points. And today's, or 2016, the last data, were 40. We improved 6 points, not 10, 6 points, and in 2 decades. From 97 to 2016. It's not the same to improve 10 points in 8 years or to improve 6 points in 20 years. Different outcomes. Different policies, yes, there were significant different policies in some features, not everything, in some features. And the counterpart of that is what you see is in this table. Pinochet in 1974-89, 2.9% of GDP growth, and per capita lower than the US. That's why we moved from 27 to 24. In 90 to 98, 7.1% of growth, average during 8 years. This had never happened and has not happened after in the Chilean economy. 8 years of 7.1%. That includes significant increases in minimum wages, average wages, the quality of export, non-traditional export, improvements in the income distribution, etc., several positive features, and in literature is called the golden years of the Chilean economy, starting in 1990 with the return to democracy. 2 or 3 phrases of what was paid. We had a low tax rate. The government wanted to increase social expenditure, particularly health and education. We have to finance it. Healthy tax reform. In 1990, there was a new tax reform increasing taxes by equivalent of 3% of GDP, from 15% of GDP to 18%. Reform to reestablish rights of labor. It said, well, all this will destroy the economy. Private sector will not invest. What happens? The opposite. People, great business was in favor of in favor of the dictatorship, in general, openly. But in the market, they vote against Pinochet. They invest very little. 2.9% is, among other things, because capital formation, investment, equipment, machinery, infrastructure was much lower in that period than in the old democracy of the 60s, with tax reform and labor reform. What happened? The government, the initial government, was able to join forces, to reach agreement. We want a certain type of tax reform, we have to negotiate it, and it negotiated. But we got 3% of additional tax proceeds and was able to finance healthy many things, including infrastructure and investment for productive development. And 2 things that changed a lot afterwards. Manage the exchange rate. So I believe in exports. Export had to do with the exchange rate. I cannot have the exchange rate that goes up and down, up and down. And there was an active management of the exchange rate during those years. And to do that, regulate capital flows, market base. To inflows increases the wall, a fee to go in. Inflows decreases, so that to have a flow that is more or less stable into the domestic economy. And that was very determinant for business investment. If you're working in the roof of your capacity, you have more profits, you have better expectation, you invest more. And most part of the private investment, reinvestment of the profits got because the economy was not working below the roof, was working in most of this year, 91 to 98, working on the roof. Initial words, we need capital formation, we need people, and we need to use them. In this year, they were used because there was a macro for development. Have certain balance in the internal sector, exchange rate. Have an aggregate demand that depends on monetary policy and the exchange rate and capital flows that is consistent with capacity. A macro for development instead of a macro only for low inflation and the rest comes automatically. It doesn't come automatically. You have to build it with a macro for development. In the 90s, fashion in economics, look, you don't need to regulate the exchange rate. The market knows. We don't need to regulate the capital account. The market knows. They will come when you do the things good. If you do bad, they go out. So it's a way to control you in your domestic macroeconomy. And in 1999, the exchange rate was declared fully free, completely free, with no intervention of the central bank, and the capital account completely open. FDI, that is natural, but with respect to financial flows, volatile flows, speculative flows. And we were in the world in which we are, with a lot of volatility in exchange rates, a lot of volatility in capital flows. And sometimes they are optimistic, sometimes pessimistic. Optimistic, they come in, pessimistic, they go out, and that affects a lot of your activity. And if you have a roof, you cannot go over the roof, but you can go a lot below. We have a lot of fluctuation below the roof. That is underutilization of labor and capital. You are using what you have tried to build, and is discouraging additionally capacity to labor and adding capacity to the stock of capital. And the outcome the main outcome is the 3.9%. 3.9 during all long 50 years in two episodes, broken by the global crisis of 2008 and 9. We are stuck in the 3.9. That is not terrible. It's much better than Latin America. Latin America was growing 3.2%. We were growing faster than the average of Latin America. But before we were 7.9%. It is the same. It's a significant difference. And the main change in policies has been the exchange rate policy, the monetary policy, and the capital account, that is the macro policies. In the micro policies, on innovation, support to clusters, etc., the policies are relatively similar, with some ups and downs in the 90s and in the 2000s, relatively similar. The big change was macro. And the big change was that we have a big stability of the external sector, and we have big stability in aggregate demand, and it is not consistent with capacity several times. Only in 2007 and 2012 and 2013 we were too close to the roof, to the potential GDP. Only in those 3 years of 15 years. All the other years going below, with high unemployment, high underutilization of the stock of private capital. So, capital responds less and doing less innovation. What happened? Just to mention, 1998, what was happening was exports were growing about 10% per year in the 90s. In the world, were growing 6%. That was very fast. There was a true globalization of trade in the world. GDP grew of the world 3%. Export and import 6%. Chilean export were growing 10%. 1907 goes down to around 6% or 6.5%. And then comes really a stagnation. In these periods, if you take the average of all this, is something like 2.4. The average of these bad years, the global crisis, all export went down in the world. In Chile, not so much, but it went down, and then recovers, but not as much as it recovers in the rest of the world. And now the world is moving around 2.5%. This is a true change in the way international trade is working. We moved from 6 to 2.5%. And that is a fact. And a lot of people thinking this is not for 1 year, this will continue for some time. And that is a very relevant message. What to do in front of that. We will talk about that. So we have This was a leader of growth, not this one leader, not this dead unique leader. But exports were growing fast and diversifying. They're going down, they're lax in this. You don't invest one day and the next day you have the output. It's a large process, so there's a lot of lax in the expectation of this. Go down, and here going below what was going in the world economy. One question of an economist has something to do with the exchange rate? Of course. Today it is the main variable explaining the behavior of export, the main variable. Because several variables that were used in the past, today are forbidden. If you do it, you suffer punishment for the International Economic Organization, Mundial del Comercio, World Trade Organization, WTO. So a significant change in what happened in export. But look, lines 2 and 3. Dictatorship. Also very fast growth of export, up to 99%. Because exports are part of GDP, and it's very crucial the rest of GDP. And in Chile, in this time, 85% was this, and only 15 this. Now, this export about 27% of GDP. 73% is produced and used domestically. In Chile and in Korea. Korea doesn't export all GDP, export 40% of GDP. 60% of Korea is what they do for the domestic economy. They produce and use domestically. To have growth, you need to do good in exports. A big difference that explains this is what you do for the domestic economy. During that period, the domestic economy grew 6.5%. Being successful in both lines, was successful in the end. That is similar to Korea during 30 years. So we have to do well in exports, try to do well. Exchange rate, we have to try to do good in the domestic economy. And the domestic economy depends on monetary policy, the exchange rate, a cheap dollar, you are crowded by imports, and imports crowd out the small and medium producers of goods and services. They suffer a lot, a cheap dollar, and appreciated exchange rate. Why a cheap dollar? Sometimes has been capital inflows. Sometimes a high price of copper. Since 2004, we had a very high price of copper. From 2004 to 2008, and then 2009 to 2013. Only in between the big crisis, there were 6 months of low prices of copper. And the price of copper implies higher income for the treasury and higher income for the private exporters of copper. 1/3 public, 2/3 private today. And a high price, high tax collection, and high profits for private sector, larger expenditure domestically, financed with foreign currency. If you have a free exchange rate, you have a lot of dollars coming in for the exchange market, appreciating the exchange rate. And we have for most of this year, a very cheap dollar. 450, 480 pesos per dollar. Reaction of the market. Discourage export, discourage value added to export, not only what you export is important, how you produce that. What are the components, imported or domestic components? A country well tied to the world economy has exports that are intensive in domestic inputs. And you learn to export inputs of your exports. Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And other than some the Scandinavian countries, the Scandinavian, that are rich in natural resources. But also imports, and what we have had in this period. You see here is the actual price, 100 cents per pound, 200, 300. An estimation of the midterm trend, and this is the actual price. The estimation of the trend was, you see, was here the reverse. The actual was very low, jumps. The estimation of the trends starts going up, following this, and goes up a lot. And this is what the Treasury was looking in their account, the 300 cents per dollar, and you see those tax proceeds actually each year. We have a stabilization fund, but working with this field. And in here, I will take that at the end. The Treasury recognize, look, this is wrong. It's an overestimation of the copper price. 300 is not sustainable. And calls an independent committee and tells them, look, you have to revise your estimate. And they come out with this new estimation of 50 cents less. We're still a little bit optimistic, but a significant change. But the fact that the Treasury was managing the account, the structural fiscal account with these very high prices, and was sending all that money into the market. And the private sector is not stabilized, and the private sector was working with these actual prices. Here, in this period, 370 cents was the average actual price of the market. A lot of money in the market. What happened with capital flows? When the things are good, the price of copper is high, capital markets come in. They increase the excess of money. So we have two forces pushing the supply of dollar and consequently pushing down the price, the market price of the exchange rate, the price of dollar. We have a very cheap price of dollar. That explains what happened in exports and the lowering of non-traditional exports. And in imports, what we were having, I will go to what we were having in imports was a very fast increase in imports during 2004 when the price of gold goes up to 213. Imports growing something like 120%, multiplied by 2.2 times in those 10 years, and export increasing by simply 27%. A big deficit in the external sector. A growing deficit year after year. That is very important when we look what happens in 2013. And the fiscal accounts. Up to 13, GDP 3.9% in 8 to 13. Real fiscal expenditure 7.3. Real fiscal income 0.5. With a very high price of copper. It is high all this time, as I mentioned. But what is important is that real expenditure is growing much faster than GDP year after year. Financed by the high price of copper. If the price of copper stays up, there's no problem. But it was evident that the price of copper was going to go down and go down. Once again, in the old history of Chile. The market forces work. High profits, they invest more and they produce more copper, and suddenly the supply of copper goes into the market and the price of copper goes down. And as you could see here, that happened in 16. From 70 to 21 last year. Economists must learn to look forward, look ahead, and to try to put your forces so that they are consistent what you are going to meet in the future. Well, we are in 2013, after the 15 years of 3.9% growth. In 2013, happened something good. We are using full capacity. We have high employment, and we are using the stock of capital. That is a macro balance. But we have 5 imbalances that were there waiting for 2014. What is this? The readjustment of the price of copper and finding that we were increasing expenditure much more than GDP and much more than total fiscal income. And that needs 2 things: to reduce some permanent expenditure, and all the forces were in the direction of increasing expenditure, or you increase taxes. It was evident, I think, given the political situation and the desires of people, that we need a tax reform in 2014. We needed a sharp exchange revaluation, increase the price of the dollar very sharply. We were importing too much and was being balanced by transitory money, capital inflows partly, and an abnormally high price of copper. And was going to go down. And it starts going down. A bit in 13, a lot in 14, a lot in 15, more in 16. Recognize the truth. That price was not sustainable. You cannot live on transitory income. You need permanent fiscal income. By 2013, we had a reasonable investment ratio, so the stock of capital infrastructure was the total, was increasing in a reasonable manner. But there was a transitory component. Price of copper again. Good price of copper, private copper companies were enthusiastic, were investing a lot. They had high profits and they reinvest. That was part of the reasonable level of the change, the increase in the stock of capital. The mining investment had increased from 17% of in the previous decade of all the flow of new capital goods in a year to 34%. And that is not forever. And in 2013 was starting, if you look after the figures of imports of capital goods by the mining company, was going down. And in 2014, additionally going down. It was a cycle, a mining cycle. You have to take care of the cycles, to look where are leading us and to try to compensate what happens that start going down the investment ratio of the country. In that sense, the capacity to generate additional GDP associated to the mining sector. It's okay that happened, but be prepared to face it when the things go in the other direction. Public investment, infrastructure, among other things, improving schools, etc., to compensate for the drop in engineering and etc. And this one additional thing, the last I will mention, there were fiscal problems, external sector export problems in exports. We had problems with the exchange rate, the need of a tax reform, and what was happening with the capacity of the government to do things. This is more difficult to measure. It's more the talk of the people in the ministry, what they say. So there's no papers that I know about this. But there has been a weakening of the capacity to take decisions and to implement the decision. And that starts 2011, 12, 13. The government was not too concerned about that. They prefer the market can do these things. The problem is following government wanted the government to do things, but it had not installed capacity. A stock of investment projects that had gone through project evaluation, so to do good use of the money in good projects. And what finds one is that by 2014, there was a government that was weak in this doing. And comes the election, presidential election. A very popular candidate that was living here in New York, very popular, wins in a landslide the election, about close to 2/3 of the vote. So people that doesn't vote, but after the surveys that includes those that vote and don't vote, and the surveys, I don't know why, they don't distinguish, did you vote in November or December, or you did not vote? They don't do that. It's very, very cheap to do it. They don't do up to date. The fact is the surveys, even more popular, the president. Big changes, tax reform. Said during the campaign, we want, again, 3% of GDP. 1% is simply to balance the balance that we inherited. We need money for that, simply to pay, just like in the 90s, was to pay part of the debt that Pinochet left because of the crisis of the debt of the 1982. And the two additional search principally for education, reform of education, and improving in the National Health Service, and some for innovation, so on, a minor part for that. At the start, very popular in surveys, the tax reform. 60, 70, 75%, yes, we want, we like it. It's the opposite. Today, the tax reform is popular in Chile. What happened? several things that are unpopular. What happened? There was a confusing process in the tax reform. It implied significant to pay taxes not only for distributed firms, for distributed profits, but for all the profits. It is devengado in Spanish. I don't recall the English word for devengado. All the profits of the firms, the person that owns a stock of those firms, pay not only for the distributed profits, but also for the distributed profit reinvested in the fund. Eso es sistema devengado. And some green taxes and some loopholes eliminated. But there was a complicated process, a lot of discussion in between, discussion in the parliament, and in the end, there was a different tax reform. This devengado was kept for small firms, and in the other was replaced by a larger increase of the tax rate. That tax rate of firms and profit was increased from 20% to 27%. That is the general line, in some cases 25%. So a significant change, and with one particular change that I think is very positive, very progressive, is we have a system recommended by the Chicago boys, not the Chicago senior people. Policy must not be made by boys, but by experienced people. They recommend all the taxes that are paid in the firms are, since 1984, are returned when you pay your personal income tax. This is something very detailed, but difference. They return you all that money and you put that as prepaid tax. And the idea is that you have to tax only once, not twice. But taxes twice. Germany taxes twice. England taxes twice. Korea taxes twice. And if you have inequality, you tax twice the richer people. And what was done in this occasion was to, instead of returning all the money, we will return only 65% of the money. And you take that as prepaid tax in the account. Before it was 100%. It is progressive. And it is taxing the guy that consumes the profits, and it's not taxing the guys that reinvest the profits. And I think it's better to treat better the reinvestment of profits and to try to treat worse the guy that receives the profits and eats them, doesn't reinvest them, if we want to increase the stock of capital. But the thing is that public opinion is against the tax reform, a tax reform that collects 3% and in general does in a progressive way. One explanation of why this might happen, well, two explanations. One is the propaganda against the tax reform is terrible, as terrible it was in 1990. But in that time, the opposition was softer. We were returning to democracy, they were more careful, etc. Now the mass media that is controlled by the opposition has been very strong. This is a terrible reform. And the opposition parties say, if we go to power, we will dismiss. They don't know, say, how they're going to replace, because it's providing 3% of GDP. That is 13–14% of additional income of the Treasury for financing the desired expenditure. But doesn't happen only in Chile that also in the north. Finance additional expenditure with less taxes. The other reason is there were some few green taxes. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, water, liquor, taxes on those, and on cars that spend a lot, that are with large cilindrada. That are green taxes. Don't grow so fat. And Chile will have a problem, a serious problem of fatness, of poor children growing fat from very thin to very fat, and goes in the right direction, but it's a minor part of the collection, 0.1% of the 3%. But in the minds of people, I paid 5 pesos for the Coca-Cola. I don't like the tax reform, and the opposition has pushed a lot that. But the tax is in, and I doubt that it can be removed. Maybe some changes can be made. And of course, there are improvements to be done. There's still many loopholes. So we have a situation, I'm approaching the end, a situation where in 2013, we were in the roof of activity. You don't have a space to push more up. You can only push down or stay there. We have a 5 disequilibrium that had to be solved shortly. And we arrive at a worst world. Latin America, all Latin America, since 2013 has been slowing down. Chile slowed a lot. Chile slowed a lot, from 3.9 to 1.9. But Latin America, around 1%. They went down from 3.2%, that was the average in the previous 25 years of Latin America, moved down to around 1%, with Brazil minus 3%, and Peru and Colombia 2, 3 or 3.5%, doing better than Chile, but Chile better than the average. We arrive at a poor world, that exports are weaker, and mood of the people are worse. The mood in France, the mood in Italy. I was in Italy during the last election, where I consider very good first minister lost. And resigned. And that also happening in Chile, but in Peru also. If you look at the surveys with the previous president, the present president comes very fast, go down. And maybe also the previous one and the present one both first. That needs a lot of capacity to join society, to design a route of where to move. And we are in periods where the desconcertación, the uncertainty is very, very strong. But we believe we have elements to face that and two last things. One, correct macro is one part. It's the easy part, not the difficult part. We have had a GDP, actual GDP, fluctuating below GDP. We are quite below. In 10, 11, we were quite below most part of the previous year, with exceptions 2012 to 2013. We correct that. That's guiding globalization, taking the capacity to do your own monetary policy for your economic activity. The US or the French economic activity, for that of Chile. And the instability is very costly. In employment, a lot of informality. Today, most part of the employment created in Chile are informal, most part, not formal, with social security, contracts, etc. Because we are below the roof with uncertainty. You have to clean uncertainty, that is political, but also need economics. To retake the capacity to manage the exchange rate, the capacity to regulate capital flows, the legal instrument, if we want to use. And we have the small and medium firms that have been suffering a lot the instability in aggregate demand and the exchange rate. And to restart, to retake with a lot of strength what one could call take care of structural heterogeneity. The capacity of small firms to respond to certain signals is different to large firms. Informal have much lower capacity. We need to make specific policies for different sectors. I think a policy that takes care of all the comprehensive program to support the small and medium firms. There is our capacity of the capacity gap of the 40% with the US, not in big firms. Big firms are high technologically. The best in the top are champions in the world. 20 firms of Chile. Exporting, 20 firms cover the great majority of export, 70% of export. They are in the top of capacity in the world. They pay high wages, they are rather competitive with the other, but the country is 40%. That means that the rest of the economy is much lower, and those are informals and SMEs firms. And one needs a special taking care of them with the exchange rate, with the aggregated demand, and in the access to capital markets. Half of small firms don't have access to capital markets. And the other half has with very high real interest rate, 20% a year. That is very detrimental for productive development. You can finance a little start. You cannot finance growing if you have to pay 20%. The business doesn't give so much. And with a big program of labor training, education improve a lot in quantity, a lot. In the universities, everybody is finishing 12 years of education, but very low quality. And that is an international test. They have difficulty in understanding arithmetic and understanding words in the prose and prose. We need a big, systematic, persistent program for training of the youngs that are already in the labor force and that they have insufficient low quality education. And those things can be done technically. Today there's a growing discussion. Yes, we need to support the small and medium firms, labor training. The problem is how to do, but you can do something much more than today. Yeah, and in the capital market, we have the supply of funds. We need the channels to reach SMEs. And the big problem is if we are able for the next occasion to retake the integration of society, to reach agreements, and to go straight ahead without discussing everything as we are doing today in Chile, and I'm afraid in most part of the world, including South Korea today, 1 week ago. And I am open to any comments. Y gracias por aguantar hasta el final.
Well, why don't we turn right away to questions from the floor? Raise your hand if you could possibly just identify yourself a little bit and then pose your question. Yeah.
Peter Wynn, Tufts University. Ricardo, one word that you did not use was China. And yet, it seems to me that much of the Chilean economy's ups and downs, beginning in 2004 and continuing today, reflects the fact of China becoming Chile's leading trading partner, and China having going through its own ups and downs economically, and most recently, a slowing of Chinese growth being reflected, it seems to me, in slowing purchase of Chilean and other exports. How important do you feel this external factor is?
China has been, of course, very important. More than overall trade of Chile is the copper. That is still between 1/3 and half of Chilean export. And China has been very influential in the case of copper. And the prospects are less positive than they were seen, let's say, by 2007 or 2010, after China jumps, after the shock. But 6.5% is not terrible. One, I don't feel an expert of China, but my expectation is that they manage quite well, these guys. They are facing problems, political problems. It has leakages, the Communist Party and so on. But if they're able to manage the 6 or 6.5%, it's the collapse of the copper market. And I think, well, China is a very important buyer, by very far, the main purchasers of imported copper. They produce some copper, but they import a lot. But the market, maybe that is the Chicago, the market. Inflation in the world imply a rather solid demand of copper, not 5% per year, 4%, maybe 3%. Gives the message there is something chaotic. We could have problems. We have to learn to face it. Have a strong stabilization of how you treat the price of copper in your domestic economy, stabilize it and be conservative in that. Don't count on that. Don't be over-optimistic. Be a little bit under-optimistic. And you have to do a big, tremendous effort in your domestic economy. Develop your domestic economy. 99% of firms operate in the domestic economy. Internal Revenue Service says we have 800,000 firms active, 1 million including the inactive. A small firm exporting 5,000. And those 5,000 export 0.5% of Chilean export. Because some export $50,000, $10,000, small things. They are in the domestic economy. and all the informals on the domestic economy. If you want to do inclusion, you have to put your big effort there. Informals, small and medium firms. And count that in export, maybe what you have to do, because you have a lot to do, given your export, your low export are not collapsing, they're not growing. They're growing 1%. It's not minus 20%, it's plus 1%. How we produce them. And I think in this government was able to push the idea of let us organize clusters around the 6 or 7 main exports of Chile to develop the production of intermediate goods and services. Those are something, $15 billion. That is a huge amount for money for the Chilean economy. 6-7% of GDP. If you do 1/10 of that per year, you're adding a significant contribution of exports, the same volume of export, but produce more internally to GDP. And that was accepted by the opposition, the right opposition. The business association, before they used to say that that is going against the market. We cannot do that. They have learned that is going in favor of the market, developing the domestic market for them. They're private producers, all of them. They learn, and that is positive. So I think in the next call we might continue what has been started and to strengthen it, to improve, in a sense, the quality of export and development of the rest of the economy, and to, in terms of natural resources, we have still a little bit to go in a world where export grow 3%, not 6%. So it will be tougher to go into those markets. But and something to China, we are going not only with copper. 10 years ago it was copper. Now, Shanghai, they're eating grapes, Chilean grapes, and peaches. And it's good to see them. And in New York also.
Yes, go ahead.
John Brucci, International Center. The demise of TPP, how does that affect Chile in some way?
I think the TPP very little positive and some risk for Chile. The main risk were taken well care during the negotiation. It is surprising. We have had a free president of the central bank and free minister of finance that they don't use the restriction on capital flows, that is called the encaje, reserve requirements on capital inflows. We have the instrument, but it has not been used since 97. And 91 to 97, very strong. It was the main instrument of real macro balances. But the representative of Chile fought against the US that was pressing everybody open capital accounts because that is good for the world development. I can understand why. It's bad for the US, that also. But the people was pressing in that direction. Chile was able to defend the encaje. So the final TPP of October 15, October 15, was okay for Chile in that line. The same day that was published the agreement of the TPP, we published in Global Policy with Kevin Gallagher a paper discussing the TPP, comparing Malaysia and Chile, the management of the capital account, on what we had to be careful, Malaysia and Chile, in the negotiation. Is curiously the same day appearing online and afterwards printed by Global Policy. In trade, we had trade agreements with all the members. There's no a minor, very minor thing, very minor. And it had it is a severe political problem. The TPP was made for speculators. It's not for traders of imports and exports. It was for a speculator. But the truth is that it was achieved much less for that line that they were seeking. But the much comes from the initial proposal. Full opening of the capital accounts, full opening and full liberalization of flows among stock market, etc. But in the end, did not end in that. So I think politically it's better for Chile, thanks Trump, in that point. We don't have, but they're talking of having a TPP for 11. And some of those pressing are in the financial lobby. Mm-hmm. The financial has the hope if we revise that, now we can get it. And that would be bad for the 11 countries and bad for the world. Speculative finance is very detrimental for growth, very detrimental for equity, very detrimental. Schiller, his professor, Krugman, Akerlof, Danny Roderick, and the IMF says, we were wrong. We have to manage, we have to consider managing the exchange rate. The IMF saying that with Oliver Blanchard. And Austria saying, what is good in speculative capital flows? The head, after the head of the, after Offal or before Blanchard, writing very strong things. We have to rethink the issue of managing capital flows. They're hurting the world. The US, the European Union, and all Latin America. Pro-cyclical, detrimental of growth and of inclusion.
There was another question back there.
Yes. I have two questions. Looking at the figure of exports, it's very interesting that from 73 to 2009, Chilean export behaved much better than world exports. Starting in 2010, Chilean exports are much worse than world exports. Partly can be explained for the price of copper and what that implies for the exchange rate. But was there a structural change, something that makes that point of inflection so significant in 2010? The second question has to do with economic governance. I like your point that macro should be for stability of macro variables and development rather than exclusively for stability of macro variables, let's say price level, reasonable budget balance. But that implies that there is a serious problem of economic governance in the Chilean economy. This situation in which there is a very significant gap between potential global output or GDP and actual GDP.
Yeah, the first one, figures show this breaking to 8 or to 9. But things were happening before. And the problem that when you have some breaks in between, the decision to free the exchange rate and the capital account was late 90s, 91, 2000, 2001, the decisions. But the investment projects were going in. Some cases, the investment projects take 5, 6, 7 years. You then make the decision and you start, you continue. It's very costly to invest $1 billion and you say, we lost this. We don't continue. You continue with the process. And in 99 came the Asian crisis, arrived the contagion of the 98 Asian crisis. And the response of a market with free exchange rate was a big devaluation. So you had during 3 or 4 years an expensive dollar, encouraging exports. So you don't see that. The investment in capacity to export was stimulated by a expensive dollar. The cheap dollar only appears in 2004, some 2005, additional 2007. And it started providing, we are in the direction of cheap dollar, more cheap, more cheap, more cheap. And that started discouraging export. But it's a lack. I think the crucial point is around 2005, when they start saying, we will invest less in new apple trees, in new cajitas, boxes for the salmons, etc., that they have investment projects, the process that takes time. So the exchange rate is playing around there in a context where, as figures show, world trade was growing very fast. It was the nice years of 2003 or 2008, we are in the age of great moderation. Everything is good. The world found the way to reach more employment, more investment, more growth. In the US, that was very strong, the word. We arrived at the age of great moderation. Everything is fine, adjusting gradually. And that was happening. Export were growing very fast. So we were also pushing up Chile. So that is a gradual process during 3 or 4 years, and then comes the shock of 2008, 2009, where world trade goes down 12% in real terms, and then recovers 10%. A very sharp recovery the year after, associated to China. The recovery of China, and then improved expectation of the world, etc. While the US and Europe were still behind China. I believe the exchange rate, it is just strong, because then they see, it recovers, jumps depreciation in 2009 for 8 or 9 months. And in the course of 2009, signals, Chile did quite, I did not mention, but it is in the papers. Chile did quite well the recovery. It used public investment very strongly, 4-5% GDP, public expenditure, and they were able to do it. In November 2009, the economy was growing, instead of going down 3%, growing 4%. and the exchange rate start appreciation. When the things look good, the market does the wrong thing with the exchange rate. Cheap dollar. Depreciated a lot, and October, November, December, January to 10, a cheaper dollar. The signal, look, will happen again. We don't invest in exports. And some things that work for some time, they don't work for all life. Exploit your natural resources, and we plant a tree and grows fast, good. But many others are doing that in the world. You have to learn a little bit more. The quality of the fruit, how you process it, how you export, etc. But those things work in Chile. The 1% is the average of not traditional, of the 6,000 or 7,000 items exported, not traditional, with a high concentration in 100 or 200. The economic governance. When we arrived to democracy, 1990, I think there had been, Jonathan mentioned part of the history. Between 83, when in the world saw that the Pinochet was going down, in the course of 1983, there was hundreds of newsmen in Santiago. Pinochet is going down. He retook power. They sent the soldiers to the street and put peace, and he stayed 6 years more, until 1990, March 90. There was a significant group of economists thinking seriously in what to do. We were prepared in 1983. Unfortunately, it was not the opportunity. I think we were prepared to take the government with a good economic program. And there was the people of CIEPLAN, of Programa de Economía del Trabajo, Humberto Vega, and the people trained in labor economics, some people in Flaxo, some people in CEPAL, waiting, good working there and learning about Latin America, other experience, and so on. And there was an increasing coordination with the Chilean groups abroad, the Venezuela group, the Estocolmo group, the Ciudad de México group, where Lucho Mayra, Insulza, Sergio Vitar, Renan Fuentealba, Claudio Huepe, Jorge Arrate, Carlos Minami in Paris. We were working together. Whenever we traveled, we got together with them, and we had a discussion of issues. We were coordinating. When we arrived to power, we have 30, 40 people well trained in a common view. We were against Pinochet, so that made people weak against the policy of Pinochet. They dare to say, or we have to do the same as Pinochet. We were in the opposition to him very clearly. A dirty opposition, sangrienta, a bloody opposition, government. Very well coordinated. I think that is one secret of why we have so good economic policy, not perfect. Several things I disagree, but I agree with most. So you have to take the most instead of nothing. Very coordinated, 90, 91, 92, 93. That starts gradually to disappear. we did well. No, it's okay. We are now more open to do different things. And start spreading the proposition is something that was by 97, los flagelantes y los complacientes. Those that like everything and those that punish themselves because they accepted things that were done. And the coalition was not able to process that. But it was something very gradual. You start losing. And in the same time, the teaching of economics was moving sharply in the wrong direction. Open macro with free exchange rate, free capital accounts. The world economy will do your macroeconomics. They will do it for you. Don't care, you will do wrong. They will do. And as we were talking with Jonathan before, when we were in the wrong room, the deans of economics writing, look now that we have free exchange rate and open macro, central bank has nothing to do. Just a little bit about monetary policy, but monetary policy is done in the Fed. Don't care too much. You cannot go too far from the Fed. And that was very strong in teaching, and very strong in the people reaching to the central bank. The central bank of 2000 was more rightist and more neoliberal than it was when I arrived in 1990 to the bank. There were a lot of people that had worked there during the dictatorship that were more open because they had been trained 10 years before or 20 years before, and they had gained experience in the bank. You have the new PhD that arrived to the bank, and they are the people behind the decisions because they are trusted by the board that are recent PhD from the US. They are from the US. But in England it's not so different, even in France today. It was a globalization of neoliberalism and now we are living it partly, as with several names of prices that are talking, we were wrong, or they were wrong, we have to correct. And that was progressive in the Minister of Finance of 2006, very neoliberal, and 6 to 9, very neoliberal, democratic, honest people, some nice people, but they had learned to believe in what was the truth in the periods. And then in 10 to 14, the same thing. And today, something similar. They all, with some exception. 1 week ago, the Minister of Finance said, oh, we have to look into exports. Very impressive, very good. He was saying, we have to take care of it. We have to think about what is happening. But before, no, the market knows. That was very, very strong. The market knows. You don't know, the market knows. And the market is people. Why the other people knows and we don't know? They're people also. Other in the market, they receive wrong signals. Usage of the exchange rate, inflate the aggregate demand, and then you have to correct downward, and it's very costly. It's always regressive. You have to do it, but it's regressive. But one has hope that we are moving in the right direction in the teaching of economics. But we have long lags. We have a Keynesian lag of 1930 that was strong in the 70s and 60s, 40 years after. In 1940, Keynesianism was not so strong in the world. It was stronger 20 years after, stronger. And the same hope will happen with neoliberalism.
Okay, I was going to just insert a quick question, or you want to? You're the boss.
Any question?
Just quickly, sort of a bit of a follow-up. I mean, the eternal optimist in you, I mean, is sort of saying, look, it's the exchange rate. I mean, it's the exchange rate. And at one level, I really agree with you, you know, that glorious decade was based on, you know, export-led growth, the non-traditional, labor-intensive, labor-demanding, sort of a broadening, and the kind of model that, you know, took many Asian countries forward in the West. And we, letting the exchange rate become appreciated, stops that. But two questions to follow from that. One is, well, unfortunately now that's kind of in the hand, like your last response suggested, it's in the hands of central bankers now. It's not clearly controlled by democratic decision-making whether we switch back to another process or not. But two, maybe isn't that being also perhaps a bit too optimistic? Maybe there was something about that decade that was special, right? I mean, that was a lot of the expansion of fruit and whatever that was into sort of new territories, new easy frontiers. Those frontiers are kind of exhausted now. Maybe, I guess I'm trying to bring back the point of view that says, you know, well, at the end of the day, it's Chile has to invest in education and make those deep human capital investment hard projects that are now seemingly stalled. And so I guess I wanted to push back on that a little bit. Or is education reform really, are there sort of structural, deeper explanations for the slowdown? Is Chile just returning to normality because it will be normal so long until it lifts up on those fronts? Did you want to get your question in, or?
Go ahead. I'll raise mine.
Central banks. Pinochet, 5 days before the election, that it was evident Elwin was going to be, dictated the independent central bank. He was 16 years, 5 months and 24 days with dependent bank, and he left a independent bank with because of the majority designed by him. He approved all the 5, but there were 2 of the Concertación Democrática. In 90 to 96, every day, the central bank was coordinating with the treasury, was not exerting independence. Every day was a unique macro policy in those years. After 1966, where the president of the bank resigned, angry, the central bank gradually started moving, exerting the independence. And actually, 1 year after, there were declaration of the Minister of Economics, I'm concerned about the exchange rate, and the president of the bank saying, it is my responsibility and I am not concerned. So they were splitting. For several years, the central bank was doing something that was more or less contradictory with what the government said, as I mentioned, the Minister of Economics and also the Minister of Finance, that it more like a too cheap dollar and was getting too cheap. Afterwards, the change of the Minister of Finance and they take the same line. Free exchange rate, open capital account, monetary policy only to fight inflation, employment automatically comes afterwards. And that was very explicit in the declaration of the and it is open economics, open training, what they were taught very, very clearly, very with no sophistication. So. And we end having a macro that is managed by the central bank. That they go once a year to make an exposition, but they discuss 30 or 60 with the 5 members of the Comisión de Hacienda del Senado, and that's all, I think. This out of the democratic system, even though the of the board have to be approved by this now. Before they were approved by the 4 generals in 89. Now it's approved by the Senate. But it's not responding to this. But individually, they're nice guys, intelligent, good professors. A couple of them were in CIPLAN, assistant to us. They're nice guys, but they're in the system and under the strong pressures of the financial community. Very strong pressure, every day. Through el Mercurio, la Tercera. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to name this guy, you have to name this guy. And for the government, has been very difficult to get free. Very difficult. And they don't have a clear view. In 1990, there was a very clear view. 90, 91, 92, 93, very clear. And a strong man in charge of economic, Alejandro Fausti. He was the head, not the president of the bank, he was the head of finance. He talked with the board, and we got together. I was in the central bank. And we did this macro for development. Things pointing in favor. In the dictatorship, there were potential forces not well exploited. I think we were able to exploit in this capacity to produce fruit, not only grapes and apples and peaches, but also berries, asparagus, qué sé yo. A lot, 10, 12, 14 natural resources that we can produce a lot of that. And that was exploited. And you can exploit once, but not twice. You have to find additionals. And for that, you need good rules and guidance, gear, direction where to move. And the exchange rate and the things in the infrastructure and so in the capital markets, look, social security firms, you have a lot of money, send it away. And we have $60 billion invested abroad. And we need financing in the domestic economy. There are no channels to do it, as I mentioned. And we move further, more money away, more money away. 10%, 50%, 70%, 80% of the money can be sent away. And that was the inspiration. That was in the mind of the people, financierism instead of productivism. Very, very strong. The followers without independence from the standard teaching of macroeconomics in Anglo-Saxon countries. But we are starting to free from that. I mentioned the master of clusters. Business people saying, oh, that's good for me, not bad for me. They're learning. In education, quantity, I think I mentioned a lot of quantity, low quality. There was a lack of care for that. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Impressive. With some of the people in education writing papers saying, look, this is a problem. Mario Weissman, it's called Educación 2020. It has several very good people writing, speaking, etc. But not heard because it's more difficult. Simply increase the universities. More universities, more job. 1 million people who is very poor. Es una estafa for the poor people spending 5 or 6 years in there. And that is the problem of the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that's why educational reform needed priority for quality. And it was left at the end. An economist in charge of the Ministry of Education that did not understand about education, not economics. He had been there 5 years, a very traditional minister. Minister of Education started doing the opposite he should have done. Improve the quality in public education that was going down, down, down. Support and improve the quality of the school, of the benches, so on, and the teaching. And now, 4 years after, this talk of that. We need, I think I have put in the note, but I forgot, usually, of the note, 5 message. We need to reform this, need to reform 5 things, 6. And one is the quality of education, priority for that, priority, quality, 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 to work with the teachers association. It's complicated to work with them, very complicated. They don't want controls, evaluation, and so on. But to put, and people talks of low quality of education, so we have the support of people, I suppose, in this, to go fight stronger than 4 years ago. And the capacity of the government to execute. And that has to do with the 2% growth of Chile, the decision of the government to use public investment to reactivate the economy. To what Obama did, to what Trump has been talking about in very different macro situation, what China did and Korea did. Chile did in 2009. Now the minister says, if we do that, the financial market will punish us. And the day before I left Santiago, the consequence is that we stay with a decelerated economy. There's no strong private demand. It has to be public demand. And you have to build infrastructure. This quality of the school, there's a lot to do in los liceos fiscales. They're in bad shape. Spend, pintarlos, etc., arreglar las tablas, los bancos, etc. He said explicitly, if we do it, the financial market will punish us, worsening the grade. We have a very good grade, 140 basic points. That's very good, very good. The week before I left Santiago, a man of a risk rating agency, oh, this economy is decelerated. I'm afraid we will have to downgrade. Of course, if you don't accelerate, they will punish you. If you do accelerate and you do good, 209, they will improve our grade. It is short-sightedness and follow the signals that you receive in the press or in the coffees or in the breakfast daily from the financial lobby. And we need, of course, finance, but volatility.
We're getting towards the end, so maybe the last question and brief response.
So one of the things that worries me from outside of Chile for the last 30 years is that, and it's clear to some of us, that there was a consensus, not only within Concertación, the first after 1990, but also the ability to work with people of other parties. That's a climate of understanding, conciliation, concerted decision-making in a broader sense. That seems to have gone down the hill. We seem to have lost that spirit of concertación, conciliación. And I see that in complaints by business people, complaints by the reform process, quality of it, some of the nature, the implementation, and a whole range of issues. Where is Chile at in that sense? If that is right, it is success owed to a consensus, based on working consensus, politically mediated, essential. Is that consensus broken? And if it is, what's going to fix it in this next year? Part of that is if, in fact, the reform process, the reforms, the debates, was reflected in much lower levels of investment by business, which I think is shown, right? The investment is way down in Chile. If that is the case, I'm further worried about what would happen with the political reform that still has to be processed, that President Bachelet said she would bring up. So I don't know where that's going, but that's an additional reason for my worry.
Constitution?
Yeah, the Constitution. So, but even without that reform, relations with other members of the political system are somewhat strained, and empresarios retracted investment rate. So are you optimistic, this is my last question, that there will be a way of reframing those, realigning those forces in the political system in a successful way so that we enter, or we finish 2017 in a better note than we have until this year?
Well, I think es cuesta arriba. It is a tough task. But people will be seeing that we have been 4 years with a very weak situation. Everybody dissatisfied how things are operating. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to have the things worst in order to step up. I think that happened to some degree in 1990. We have to change the atmosphere. And it was willingness in gente pinochetista to discuss with the government and say, yeah, it has to be a tax reform. We will have it, but let us discuss detail. And the tax reform was somewhat weaker than what we wanted. But what we got was very good. 3% in progressive form. Reestablishing taxes on firms, there was 0. No taxes on firms. In 1988, the plebiscito was suppressed by Pinochet and established with a higher rate. I think this is a very uneasy situation, non-easy situation, that people that is not mad or stupid takes note, well, we're maybe most are losing with this situation. For that to happen, you need some clear minds. And we have 7 or 8 months. It might emerge. Maybe some of the people that are presidential candidates in this moment, presidential candidates. And these more people says, look, of course we need agreements. The problem, an agreement is not giving away your mind. It's not selling your views, but imposing the majority of your views, not the 100% of those views. And I think the last 2 or 3 months, there are negative signals, but also these positive signals. More people recognizing that we need growth, economic growth. We need growth. Growth is not a concentration. Growth can be inclusive. And there appears the issue of a small SMEs in the picture. 2 or 3 parties that are working last Saturday and next Saturday, getting together 200 people in commission to discuss problem, to have an agreement for the election and a common candidate. This activity, it can exploit or explode or go ahead, emerge. There's a possibility. We have a hope, and there are some strong minds with some popularity that are doing the effort. We have several people quite concerned that we are in times of more danger than 3 years ago. Some people said we're in danger, we have to do some things quite good or not that good. We are today in a stronger danger. There's a possibility of having success, but some probabilities to go to where several Latin American countries are in a political impasse, terrible fight with the doors apparently closed in some of the Latin American countries. We can open the door, and we have the ingredients for it, but we need patience. And in 1990, people was very patient. For 3 or 4 years, they were very patient. And they gained with it better wages, better employment, higher, much higher minimum wage with lower inflation. Miracle. Yes, there was a sort of miracle. And people can, the will of people can do some miracles. But today is more difficult, I think, than in 1990. In spite that in there we have all the leyes de amarre, all the restriction of the laws left by Pinochet. We have a lot of, now we have more freedom to do things. But the people is more angry, más enojados. Pero en la encuesta dicen que están bien, pero están molestos con los vecinos. They're annoyed with the neighbor, with the rest of the people, with the politician, with the church, with the judge, with the carabinero, etc. But I'm not bad. It's very impressive, but it's not my field. Fortunately.
So you're optimistic?
We have hope, and we are fighting for that. We go back, but in the rare forces. I'm old now.
No.
I'm not head of anything, but I support younger people. It's my time. Bueno, muchas gracias.